So welcome everyone on behalf of NJTESOL-NJBE Professional Development Committee. We are so happy you are here for our first PLC on dyslexia screening for multilingual learners. So let's dive in. I am so happy to have my professor here, Amy Garner. She is the co-director of the Children's Dyslexia Center in Scotch Plains. She is an adjunct professor at FDU. She is a reading teacher and special education coach in Branchburg, and she presents often, including at the New Jersey International Dyslexia Association. So Amy, thank you so much for being here tonight with us.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
And my name is Kathryn Tepedino, and I am the chair for the PD committee for NJTESOL-NJBE and a literacy coach in Morristown. So tonight's agenda, we are going to talk about universal screening, dyslexia screening, a little bit about the new legislation, and just what a typical screener entails for students. And then we're going to talk about screening multilingual learners and culturally responsive practices, along with some newly released documents by the NJDOE. We also have our Padlet for you with resources. So Governor Murphy signed very important legislation which went into effect this school year, which requires literacy screening for all students in grades K-3 at least twice a year. It mandates scores be sent home to parents within 30 days of after the closing of the screening period. So let's say your screening period ends October 20th, then parents need to be notified by scores within 30 days of that close of that screening period. It requires districts to report their data to the DOE, and it mandates PD training for staff grades pre-K to 3, and that we provide support for students who are in need of intervention. So another part of the screening is the Learning Equity and Academic Recovery Office. Another part of the legislation is the establishment of the LEAR office, and they have released the New Jersey Literacy Framework, which I highly recommend you check out. It talks all about evidence-based practices and how to support your school district in the screening of your students, including a multilingual learner checklist, which we will get into. The DOE does not name specific screeners that it recommends, but there was a working group on student literacy that put together a recommendation report to the DOE, so you can check that out as well. And they were able to name a list of screeners recommended for use.
So what does literacy screening mean? What are we talking about? It's defined by New Jersey as a process in order to gather information about specific literacy skills to help identify or predict students at risk of experiencing reading difficulties, and to help inform instruction, differentiate and target intervention, and also to determine if additional assessments are required for that student. So what really is a screener for reading? It's a brief assessment of a particular skill or ability that really has a highly predicative information for a later outcome. It really helps teachers and schools to help identify quickly what students are in need of intervention and who do not. It helps them quickly differentiate. Okay, these students, according to this screener, really could benefit from this type of intervention. These students do not need intervention. It also helps focus on specific skills, and these specific skills for reading are highly correlated with a broader measurement of reading achievement. So it's highly accurate at sorting out students. So why are we doing a universal screening? It's really just like the first step. We know, and the research shows, that early intervention and remediation is critical. The sooner we can identify students in need of intervention, the sooner we're going to help them. We know the younger they are, that their brains are more pliable and more ready for instruction, so that the intervention at the younger levels is critical and crucial to help further reading success. The longer we wait to provide intervention, the harder it is for students to catch up, and they just keep falling farther and farther behind. So having this universal screening will help identify these kids at risk earlier. Okay. And it's kind of just talked about that, but it's really also identifying kids who might be at future risk. So right now, maybe in kindergarten, they look like they're meeting all the benchmarks, but there might be specific areas or reading challenges that they're having. So through this screening, we're able to identify them and to intervene early to give them this specific targeted instruction to really help close those gaps, so that they don't just keep moving up grades and falling farther and farther behind. It's also crucial.
Sorry.
That's okay. Crucial for identifying and addressing reading challenges before they become a long-term issue. So if we know that if we can identify them in the younger grades, hopefully with this intervention, they won't need further targeted instruction or, need special education or anything like that, because we've caught them when they were younger.
So some common myths that we often hear about screening for multilingual learners are on the screen. I'm going to give you a chance to just read them for a minute, and then if you could just put in the chat which ones stand out to you, or which ones like you hear all the time, or which ones did you maybe think were not a myth that you thought were fact, anything like that. So we'll just give a few more seconds to read these over. And then feel free to enter in the chat any comments.
Kathy, should we do the next screen too, so they can see that, since there's more common myths?
Oh yeah, sure. So I'm seeing in the chat, I've heard the myth that dyslexia doesn't transfer languages. MLs cannot learn to read at a comparable rate. Yeah, I hear that all the time. We should not use the same tools. Great. And then let's go to the next slide. So here are a few more. So one I hear a lot is MLs not proficient in English, shouldn't be taught to read until they can speak it. This is one I feel like that's pervasive. And this couldn't be further from the truth. MLs should be taught to read in English the second they walk into the doors of our schools. So a lot here that, if you have heard this or believe this, is really critical for dispelling these myths in your districts, in your schools, because many, many people think that, in a bilingual program, you only need one language, you don't have to do both. And if we're teaching to read in both languages, we need to be screening in both languages. If an ML
not distracting you. You're doing whatever you're doing. I'm just talking.
if an ML is learning to speak English, that doesn't mean they can't also learn to read in English at the same time. Okay, so here's a nice infographic that kind of dispels a lot of these myths. This is from the United States Department of Education, and it's basically showing that the second English learners or multilingual learners enter our schools. We should be teaching them. We should not be delaying interventions for them if they're showing risks. We should be providing them with supports. Just because they're multilingual learners doesn't mean that they don't deserve extra support in reading, just like a monolingual student might need extra support. If you have a bilingual program and you're lucky to have a screener in English and Spanish, then you are able to say, you know what, this is not a language issue, this is a reading issue. They're also having trouble in their native language too. This has nothing to do with the fact that, they're a multilingual learner. And it really takes like a collaborative effort, a team effort, to support our students in learning to read.
So all students, go ahead.
Go ahead, sorry. Go.
No, that's okay. So all students really need to be screened, even those MLs. And the research is showing that by doing this, it's addressing the individual learning needs, kind of tying back with Kathy's saying, being able to identify who is really struggling with reading, or is it because of their language? It's also ensuring an educational equality, equity for everybody. It's also going to prevent future reading difficulties, and can and should be administered in English and in the L2 when possible. And that the data indicates that MLs are underrepresented at the elementary level in special education, but they're overrepresented in that secondary level. So what is dyslexia? Here's the definition. It is a specific learning disability. It has that neurobiological origin. We know that people with dyslexia's brains are different. They are accessing different parts of their brain while reading. And it's really characterized okay, sorry. Sorry, I was automatically muted. And it's characterized really with difficulties with accurate and or fluent word recognition, and then by poor spelling and decoding abilities. These students have a difficult time decoding and encoding words because they have a deficit in that phonological component of language. They have a hard time hearing the sounds in isolation, being able to separate them, manipulate them. But it is unexpected to any other cognitive ability. These kids are, or these people are highly intelligent. They've had really great classroom instruction. They've had great instruction in the components of being a good reader. And unfortunately, because of this difficulty with this accurate and fluent word recognition, so they have a hard time reading these words in isolation, then of course, when it comes to text, they have these secondary consequences with the reading comprehension. And because they're struggling with understanding what they're reading, they're going to have a reduced reading experience. They're going to be the kids that are less likely to pick up books and want to read because reading is hard. So they have less exposures to different genres, to vocabulary, to schema. And because of that, the less they read, then it's also going to impede them building and gaining their growth of vocabulary and background knowledge. So what's the difference between a dyslexia screener and a universal screener? So the universal screener is a screener that is going to, for general reading difficulties. So it's going to look at reading in general. When we're looking at a dyslexia screener, we're looking at a screener that's going to be related very closely to dyslexia and the symptoms and characteristics of a student or a person with dyslexia. Okay, so what does that mean? It means that when we're looking at this dyslexia screener, we're looking at assessments and components of the screener that are going to really highly focus on that word recognition, that phonological awareness, because that's one of their primary symptoms of dyslexia is that word recognition and that phonological awareness versus that universal screening that's going to be screening for all areas of reading. Okay, but both are helping identify students at risk and students at need for early intervention and supports. Okay, so when we're specifically looking at that dyslexia screener, many and most screeners really have these types of subtests, that phonological awareness. That's an area of weakness, and that's usually a red flag in kids with dyslexia. They have a hard time being able to recognize and manipulate the sounds of our language. They have tests that are going to be assessing rapid automatizing naming, which is the ability to quickly retrieve information. It's that processing speed and that information from their phonological memory as well. Looking at that alphabetic principle, that's the ability to associate those letters with those sounds. So we know that kids with dyslexia not only struggle with that phonemic awareness of manipulating the sounds, but also understanding that these sounds or these phonemes have letters that connect with it to be able to represent those sounds. So a lot of the assessments are looking at that alphabetic principle. And then they have that word reading. So reading words in isolation to be able to fluently and accurately decode words using this sound symbol correspondence and sight word recognition. So why are we doing this? We talked a little bit about this. The importance of screening to identify students at risk. The sooner we can identify students at risk, the better we can give them the intervention so that they can get what they need. But it also gives us information on the core instruction or that tier 1 instruction. Okay, so if we're looking at a group of students in a classroom and they've all been screened, if more than 20% of the students are below benchmark, then we have to look at the core instruction that is happening within that classroom or within that district or the curriculum or reading and tools that we are using to adjust tier 1 instruction. It doesn't mean that all of these students in the classroom are at risk for a reading disability. We need to look at the instruction that has been given so that we can provide the students what they need, all students. So a universal screening, how do we do it? It's brief, it's quick. It's like 10 minutes or less per student, okay? The subtests are given to the students are integral. They're extremely important for that reading development. However, a screening is not diagnostic, okay? It's not going to diagnose a child. It's going to solely identify students at risk for dyslexia and or other reading difficulties. So we're going to catch them early. We're going to see who's going to be at risk. Here's some common screeners that districts use. The DIBELS, which is free. There's another part of DIBELS called the M-Class DIBELS. It includes extra assessments such as the oral language or that RAN, that's that rapid automatic naming, which we talked about, is often a subtest in a dyslexia screener because it's looking at the children's processing speed and their ability to, when we're looking at that, it's their ability to read words and take it in and process it. Can they look at those sounds and process it to be able to read the words? Ames Web is another one. PAR, which is the Predicative Assessment of Reading. Acadians, iReady, MAP, these are just some common screeners. These screeners are available in other languages. Acadians has it in Spanish and French. That M-Class has is from Dibbles in Spanish, Ameswed Plus is in Spanish, and Fastbridge in Spanish. And I don't know, Kathy, if you can speak more to any of the other screeners. And
Yeah, so unfortunately, I have not been able to find a free universal screener in Spanish. Dibbles used to have a free one through, I believe, the University of Oregon called the EDEL, but that is no longer free. It is now for purchase only through M-Class. So I'm going to talk quickly about some culturally and linguistically responsive practices that are critical to include in your screening process. And these are all from the Universal Literacy Screener Checklist for Multilingual Learners. So first, we want to make sure that our universal screeners correspond to the languages of instruction for our students. So if we have a bilingual program, we want to make sure we're screening our students in both languages of the bilingual program. We also want to make sure when we're administering the screener in English that we have directions translated or someone administering the screener who speaks the child's native language so that the student understands what they need to do. We also want to make sure we do provide targeted professional development in administering these screeners and interpreting the data and how to score so that our multilingual learners are receiving fair and accurate scores and we're getting accurate data. We never want to penalize for language variation, accents, or anything like that. So again, during screening, culturally responsive practices include again, instructions in the child's L1. We want to make sure that we are not penalizing for differences in language, and we want to avoid pre-teaching anything to them before the screening. So let's say, you administer the screener in the beginning of the year, and then, you during the year are looking at the subtests coming up next, and you're teaching exactly what's on the test, then you're going to get inaccurate results. You want to make sure that you are teaching the skills needed to succeed, but you don't want to teach like the exact words that they're going to come into contact with, because then you will not have accurate results on how they are progressing in their literacy development. After screening, we want to make sure that we are considering other data. We don't just look at the screener. We want to make sure that we're looking at the child's educational history, their years of instruction and targeted reading instruction, language development instruction. We want to make sure that we are engaging parents and family members, finding out if there's a history of reading or learning difficulties in the family, how they develop their language, their native language, do they have gaps in their L1. We want to get as much data as we can when interpreting these scores. We also want to consider their language proficiency levels, which we can obtain from their access scores or the WIDA screener or WIDA model. And again, looking at how much opportunity did they have. We don't want to assume a child needs intervention when they never had the opportunity to learn. To help a child not fall behind, we want to make sure we're giving them extra support so they don't fall behind, but we don't want to assume, oh, this child has a learning disability or something like that when they haven't, if they haven't even had a chance to receive that targeted structured instruction. So we want to look at again, the program model that they've been in. Have they been exposed even to reading instruction in English? Again, we don't want to jump the gun and just assume, that it's a learning disability. And again, looking at the data in the L1 whenever possible is so important, because this will tell us if it is language or if it is reading, a reading difficulty. If your child has a strong foundation of reading in their L1 and the screener shows that, and let's say they are at risk in English, we can assume that they will learn with proper instruction. So getting the data in both languages is key here. So the 5 pillars of reading, just as a brief review, these were identified by the National Reading Panel report as critical for reading instruction. So we want to hit phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, comprehension, and of course, oral language is the foundation for literacy instruction. And we know our MLs need that targeted oral language support as well to support their literacy development. And that is kind of why these subtests are structured the way they are.
Yeah, so here are some of the typical subtests, excuse me, that you would see in a screener. So you would have the letter naming fluency. So we're going to go over some of these subtests, explain what they are. Then you're going to see them being done in action with the dibbles. And then as we go through, we'll see which subtests go for which grade, so that you can see throughout the continuum of the grades where the subtests fall, and what's important for the little guys might be a little bit different for the older guys. Okay, so you have the typical subtest. There's the letter naming fluency, which is a standardized individual. It's standardized and it's individually administered. A lot of the subtests are individually administered, but remember, the screener is brief. It's only should be about 10-ish minutes. And again, it's providing measure for at-risk reading. So what's happening here is students are presented with 100 upper and lowercase letters and asked to read as many as they can in 1 minute. So it's tying in that rapid automatic naming with the ability to name letters, which is a precursor for reading. There's the phonemic segmentation fluency. Again, and most of these are all going to be standardized and individually administered, okay? And this is measuring phonological awareness. Phonological awareness is, again, that ability to be able to manipulate and identify sounds within words. It is one of the most important building blocks of becoming a good reader. And in this subtest, students are asked to segment 2 to 6 phoneme words into individual phonemes. Okay, and again, it's timed. They're given 1 minute, and we're going to go over each of these in isolation. The students are given 1 minute to segment the words.
So this is just a quick little example of the phoneme segmentation subtest. This is a first grade monolingual student, and the little computer screen in the bottom left is showing you the teacher just scoring the child. So let's see if I can play this here.
We're not getting any sound. You have to make a We're not getting any sound, Kathryn.
So just to interject really quickly, you can see how important it is for a multilingual learner to have the directions translated into their
Kathy,
native language.
we couldn't hear the video. I don't want to interrupt you, but we couldn't hear the video.
Oh, you
So I think you
couldn't?
need to, yeah, and for some reason you couldn't hear Kathy earlier trying to tell you. I think you need to share the sound.
Okay. Got it. So I don't know how to do that.
I think if you unshare the presentation, when you go to share, it'll say also with audio.
So get it out of present mode
Yeah.
like this.
Or sharing your screen, when you like unshare your screen
Oh,
and then reshare your screen. And when you go to share it, it'll say something with audio.
oh, okay. I will try it. But if
Guys,
it does not work, then
You also need to go into the share mode,
uh-huh.
click on the arrow, advanced sharing options. Oh no, that's not it. Is that?
Okay. Well, we have this linked for everyone. So, you could just watch it on your
Is it in
own.
the Padlet too?
It is. I don't think so, but I can add it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So basically you can see in the corner of the screen, the word is wave. So the teacher would say the word wave and the child would have to segment w-a-v. That's basically how the assessment works. In the beginning, she did some practice items with him, and it is just so critical to make sure that your child gets the directions in their native language if they need it, so that they can perform the assessment correctly. Even if a child does not speak English, even if they're a newcomer, they can still listen to words. And if they understand the task, they can break up words into sounds, right? So if I didn't, speak French or Spanish or whatever, and someone said, to me in my native language, I'm going to say a word, break it down into the sounds. Let's do some practice items together. Okay, here's your word. You can still complete the task. So again, that's why it's critical we translate. So that's the phoneme segmentation. And I'm sorry that the sound isn't working, or that the presentation isn't allowing for it, but I will link it in the Padlet. And then this is a scoring sheet. If you don't have M-Class, you can go to Dibbles and print this universal screener out for free. That is also in the Padlet. And so the scoring sheet looks like this, and you want to just mark which phonemes they were able to get and which ones they were not. So, you would put a check mark or a line underneath each one they were able to segment.
Another subtest would be the nonsense word fluency, again, standardized. And this is a test that's really measuring that alphabetic principle, which means that it's really asking students, do they know the sounds and can they sound out these nonsense words? So they can't rely on their memory of the words because they're not real words. So they have to look at them and sound them out. And do they know that alphabetical principle? Can they say those sounds and blend these nonsense words together? And they're given 1 minute to sound out these nonsense words. This is one of the biggest indicators of kids at risk for reading, is being able to read these nonsense words. There's the word reading fluency assessment subtest, and this is asking students to read words accurately and fluently. They're asked to read irregular words, and when we talk about irregular words, those are words that are not soundable or decodable. They're more like your sight words, and high frequency words as well, and they're given 1 minute to read these words.
So this is just, again, a picture of what it would look like if you had the M-Class system to administer Dibbles on the left is the nonsense word. So if the word is tud, they would have to read that. And let's say instead of tud, I don't know, they said ed, right? They said short E instead of short U. You would mark that they gave you the T, the correct sound for T. They incorrectly gave you the U, and then they gave you the correct sound for D. So that's what that's showing you. You can see in the right-hand corner of that first screen on the left, there's 2 out of 3. So that means they got 2 out of the 3 sounds correct in the nonsense word decoding section, and they would not get a point for reading the whole word correctly because they didn't read the whole word. They just segmented each sound. They sounded the word out, ed. They didn't say Ted or Tud. Had they sounded the whole word out, had they said Ted, then you would see a straight line go across and the U would be red. So nonsense words usually have 2 scores, 1 for how many correct letter sounds and 1 score for how many correct words that they were able to decode. And then on the right is the word reading fluency. You can see these are regular whole words, not regular, but some regular, some irregular. And, you know, if they get it wrong, you mark it wrong. If they self-correct, you just mark that they self-corrected it. If they skip a line, you just mark that as well. And then if you print it out, this is what it will look like printed.
There's the oral reading fluency, again, standardized, it's individually administered. It measures accuracy and oral reading fluency, which now is something that's really important for comprehension. So a child that struggles with oral reading fluency could be a predictor for having areas of weakness with comprehension. So in this case, the students are asked to read aloud as much as the passage as they can, and they're given 1 minute to read a grade level passage. And that's the important part of this assessment, is that we're really looking at the grade level passage. We're looking at their ability to orally read at their grade level. And then there's the subtest called the maze, which is another assessment for comprehension. And in this case, students are asked to read a passage silently. So again, we're really just looking at that comprehension piece, not that oral reading piece. And they're asked to circle the correct missing word that would make sense in the sentence. So when you see the scoring sheet, Kathy will go over it. You'll see that it's a passage with choices, and the student's going to read it silently and have to decide which word makes the most sense in the blank. Again, this is assessing their comprehension, and they're also given 3 minutes to complete this task.
So Amy, I see we have some questions in the chat.
Okay.
So one of them is, would F&P count as a screener?
I think what from F&P would you be looking at? I guess,
Yeah.
and I guess the most important, if you're trying to decide if what you're using is a screener, I think you should look at all of these subtests and these components. The screener, all screeners should be looking at these areas. These are the, the critical areas of reading. So like, if you're looking at it, is it a screener? Is it asking students to have some knowledge of those sounds? So that phonemic awareness. If it's just asking them to read and, tell you about the story, that's not considered a screener. It's not looking at all of those basic building blocks of becoming that students need to be a good reader. I don't know if that helps. So I feel like people sometimes look at different reading assessments, and sometimes it's an assessment and it's assessing a specific skill, but a screener is going to look at all of these building blocks. I guess go back to that screen that Kathy was talking about with those pillars. Like those are the building blocks of, becoming a reader, and all those are areas that should be looked at.
And also, it was not recommended by the literacy working group to the DOE. It is not on that list as a universal screener. So that's something else to take into consideration. Like, I don't know if the FNP is a screener, but it was not on the list of like recommended universal screeners to use as well. So, and then someone said, are nonsense words recommended for multilingual learners? I get this question a lot. Do you get this, Amy?
I do.
Yeah.
I mean, I think so. I mean, it's a building block, and it's a building block of being a reader. It's assessing their ability to decode words. And, you know, we're looking at them being able to read in English and segment. And like you said, again, like whether you're looking at French or a different language, being able to segment those sounds, what depending on the language, like that's still a skill that can be done. So nonsense words, I think, would be important for all students.
Yeah, I agree. And I really see a difference in the multilingual learners who are able to decode the nonsense words and the multilingual learners who are not. And it really tells me where their, gaps are and what I need to teach into, where their confusion is. A lot of, multilingual learners who speak Spanish doesn't have a lot of those short vowel sounds. So, you'll see a lot of short vowel confusion. And, that's a great indicator of where, they need instruction. I think it's just important to just tell them these are not real words. They're silly, they're made up, Okay. So this is, again, just an example of what the oral reading fluency and the maze look like if you do it through M-Class, if you administer through M-Class. And this is the material that you would print off of the DIBELS website for free. This is all there for free. So that's first grade. This is third grade.
Okay, so looking at the DIBELS subtests, we're gonna look at it per grade level. Okay, so in kindergarten, if you are using the DIBELS as a screener, you're gonna be looking at that letter naming fluency, so the ability to say the letters, the phonemic segmentation fluency, so being able to sound out those words and their sounds, those nonsense words, being able to apply their knowledge of sounds to read those nonsense words, and then that word reading fluency, so that's the words in isolation. So those are all the subtests for kindergarten. In first grade, it's going to include all of those subtests, but now we're going to be looking more at that oral reading fluency, because as they move into first grade and through first grade, reading and being able to put all of those skills together and to read passages is really important. And this is going to be also to identify kids that might have comprehension difficulties going forward as well, if they're getting flagged in first grade as an area of weakness. In second grade, you're looking at, now we're kind of losing because we're looking at those nonsense words. Again, we talked about they're, crucial to help identify reading difficulties, especially with decoding. Word reading fluency, that's reading words in isolation. That oral reading fluency, that's where they're reading the passages and being timed. And now we're adding in that maze comprehension piece. So we're diving deeper into comprehension, because we know as we move through the grades, first, second, that, reading to learn is going to start to become even more important as they get older. So it's looking at that comprehension piece. Third grade is going to entail the same subtests. And then by fourth grade, we're really just looking at that oral reading fluency and that maze comprehension. Because now we're really, again, like I said, moving from learning to read and reading to learn. So now it's, do they have the ability to read? Are they fluent at reading? If they're not fluent, that could be impeding their comprehension. Or are they having difficulties with comprehension? That's going to be really kind of seen through the maze subtest.
And then a lot of the times we'll get multilingual learners like in older grades, right? Who, are newcomers or who are, emerging in their English proficiency. So sometimes we may want to use some of the subtests from the lower grades to get, a better picture of, their knowledge of the alphabetic principle or, their phonemic awareness. Like, we might have to teach into some of that stuff because, Spanish is such a, transparent language, right? The sound symbol correspondence is 1-to-1. It's not trickier like English can be. So when children in Spanish-speaking countries are taught to read in Spanish, they're typically not given like phonemic awareness training. It's typically not part of the education system. So they might need some of that teaching to help them succeed at reading in English.
This is just a really great visual or chart to be able to look at the subtest and the grade level so that you can kind of see, what's being looked at per grade level.
And this is just a chart of the grade level norms for each subtest. So you can see on the left-hand side, that left-hand column is kindergarten, and then each subtest is listed there. So starting with letter naming fluency, then going to phonemic segmentation fluency, nonsense word, correct letter sounds. Under that, the words read correctly of the nonsense words, and then finally their word reading fluency. Anything in the green is considered to be not at risk. They are at benchmark. They are progressing at a rate that, is not going to cause challenges for future reading difficulties. Anything in the yellow or red would be considered, slightly at risk or at high risk for future reading difficulties if we don't intervene and give them extra support. And then you can see the BME at the top of the chart underneath where it says kindergarten, first grade, second and third. That's just beginning, middle, and end for beginning of the year, middle, and end of year.
So this is a really great flow chart. It's from the New Jersey Dyslexia Handbook, and I think it's really important for teachers of all areas to really be able to see like what to do when kids fall in a certain area. So if you're looking at, you have the green, so that's for the students that are above benchmark, and it tells you where to go. But you still have some of those students that in your classroom are like almost like outliers, like they are at or above benchmark when they take some of these screeners. However, they might be struggling within the classroom. So they have poor classroom abilities. And so I think it's important to remember that just because they did well on the screener, that doesn't mean like, okay, we don't have to look deeper, because there's obviously something going on. They're struggling within the classroom. So what should we do? And you can follow kind of that like flow chart of what to do. Like obviously if they're below benchmark, where you're going to go, but then moving down and deciding, okay, what should we do? We're going to have to do some more progress monitoring for those kids that did well on the benchmark, but are struggling within the classroom. And then I love what's also here is that like, if you're looking specifically in the area of dyslexia, here's another little, like box on the bottom, like another little checklist to be looking at for teachers to see like, okay, did our screener cover these areas? Because we know that these are areas that are really important, and these could be red flags for kids at risk for dyslexia. So this chart is excellent, I think, for, any, depending, any classroom teacher at any grade level. And again, this is from the New Jersey Dyslexia Handbook. This is amazing. Again, another checklist to help identify kids at risk for dyslexia. I'm not going to read through, but it goes through like the background information. So looking, at their background, moving into like pre-kindergarten and kindergarten, were these areas of concern or red flags? and then moving into first and then looking at first through third, but it really breaks it down so that you can really look at the child individually at their strengths and weaknesses. And I believe in our Padlet, we have the link to the New Jersey handbook so that you can really, look closer at these charts. And again, looking at the handbook too, if you have concerns about dyslexia, it's full of amazing information for teachers.
Yes, I feel like this handbook is very underutilized. So, yeah, this is a great resource. Okay, so I wanted to just point out something important when you are interpreting data for multilingual learners. A lot of the times, since there are not benchmarks normed for multilingual learners, all of the benchmarks that we talked about are normed for monolingual learners, right? So a great way to kind of get an idea of how your multilingual learner is progressing in their reading development is to compare their development to true peers. And a true peer is someone who has a similar family background, similar educational background, similar languages spoken or the same languages spoken, similar program like experience in the same program. So were they all in a bilingual program? Were they all in, ESL only instruction? So if you can pull data of students who are similar to a student who you might be questioning whether they may need more intensive support, this is a great way to kind of collect data to look at a student in question. So you can see here, I have a bunch of different categories, that are on this chart. I also share a template if you'd like to use this, make your own, but I have several categories such as languages spoken, home country, family literacy, programming, teacher, even did they have the same teacher, access scores. I broke down the access scores, their double scores, their iReady scores, right? We're really trying to get a huge picture of the data, all the data we can get, and finding students with similar experiences is going to be helpful. So the student in question for me was student A. And you can see student A came to us in kindergarten, just like the rest of these students. And in kindergarten had a composite score of a 1.9. And then if you compare the oracy scores to the literacy, you can see like her language, her oral language, her oracy, her listening and speaking were actually really high. She had a 4.8 and 4.9 in 2023 and 2024. And then, compared to her literacy development, it was continuously telling the story of, despite intervention and progress monitoring, the student was continuously falling behind the other students. So this really helped me see, I don't think this is a language issue. I think that something more is going on here. So very helpful when interpreting data for DIBELS. So that is our presentation. I'm going to go to the chat now for any questions. Let's see. And please feel free to ask anything. So if a student is not reading on level because of English acquisition level, should one screen them at their possible levels instead of an on grade level they won't do well on? So we always want to get their baseline data for their grade level. So that's number one, because MLs can achieve grade level, especially like if they are young with the proper explicit instruction, they can, you know, catch up. Obviously, they are going to need more time. They are learning to read and speak in a new language, but you always do want to get the baseline in the grade level, and then you can, of course, Amy, wouldn't you say, go down as well? And
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then look at the other areas as well.
Okay.
And go down, yes, don't go down so that you can see like downgrade level as well to see,
right.
you know, where are they functioning independently? Where, you know, where should instruction be so that you have, you know, more information to really target prescriptive instruction for the students.
Okay, Amy, and then our next question is, what if we sense that a fourth to eighth grader lacks phonemic awareness and phonics? Can you go back to administer lower grade subtests?
I would, especially if you have some concerns, because you want to, again, have that data to show, and again, to show the student's strengths and weaknesses so that you can then target instruction and intervention.
Yes, thank you. And then, so Deborah is telling us that I linked the old handbook. I'm sorry about that. I thought I did get the updated one because there's a 2024 one, right? Okay, so I will make sure I update the Padlet with the newest one. Sorry about that, Deborah. Okay. So someone said, or Kaya said, I find it difficult to use the reading on the first grade access as a data point. Kaya, I am so glad you brought this up. I have non-readers who get lucky, yep, because the access test is multiple choice. And here's the thing, the access test does not assess foundational reading skills. The access test only assesses language comprehension, right? So Scarborough's rope, we have the two strands. We have the language comprehension strand and the foundational skills strand. So the access test, and in the WIDA standards, there are no foundational reading skill standards in WIDA. WIDA only has standards that address language comprehension. So that's why in the access test, there is no assessment that assesses like phonemic awareness or word reading abilities. So that's why using the access test to inform interventions and to inform instruction is only going to help you for like language comprehension. It's not going to help for the foundational reading skills. You need to use the screeners to assess their foundational reading skills. Okay, any other questions? Is the true peer comparison time? Yes, it is in the Padlet. Do we have suggestions for how to make sure screeners understand articulation, accent differences? So the best screeners are administered one-on-one, wouldn't you say, Amy?
Yeah.
So, right, like
yeah, true screeners, most screeners are one-on-one because that's how you can really dive down and really see the student as what they are.
yeah, I mean, when it's computer administered, most of the time kids aren't even talking, right? I mean, maybe some of them do, I don't know.
Right. And that's why the screeners are supposed to be brief. They're supposed to be, because if it's something that's going to be lengthy, then you're not really screening, you know, and you're not being able to reach all the students within the classroom.
Can I just jump in real quick?
Sure.
That was what I was concerned about. Is in my school we have a whole variety of different languages. So if we're screening one-on-one, a lot of the students are going to just have a variety of different articulation. That was kind of more what I was trying to get at. Just any suggestions to make that a little easier. Thank you.
Yeah, so I mean, something I will say for the phonemic awareness assessment, like say they have to segment the word pay, for example. Like a lot of multilingual learners will go A, they'll go like A, and that's technically not wrong. They're just like the phoneme A, right, is A, but if you like stretch it out into the phones, it's A, right? But in English, it's just A, like, you know what I mean? But sometimes they'll like stretch it out a little bit more. Like sometimes multilingual learners will be more sensitized to the sounds. But definitely look. So Dibbles actually has an administration and scoring guide. It's free online. I can add that as well to the Padlet. And it basically talks about like differences in articulation and dialect and variation. So whatever screener you use, they should have like a guide to give you information on interpreting scores and things like that. Like if you're familiar with a student who always pronounces their S's a different way, like if they have like an articulation issue going on, you don't want to mark that wrong because like that's how they articulate that sound. So things like that. I don't know if that helped at all, but also like I feel like ESL and bilingual teachers are very, they have like a compassionate ear, like sympathetic ear. And so I think it's important to have ESL and bilingual teachers working with multilingual learners and screening them because a lot of the times, they are sensitized to like their own student like accent and things like that. And we don't want to take off just because of accent.
Right. I was just wondering too, if there was, I remember seeing one of your presentations and you had a sheet for what might happen with Spanish learner, the way Spanish speakers, some differences and things that might be a problem. I just was wondering about other languages too, like for Chinese or Russian, a similar, just to be aware of what problems there may be as you're screening. That's all.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can
Yeah.
link that in. There are, I do have some guides for like differences in language and, the contrastive analysis and what overlaps and what doesn't. Is that what you mean too?
Yes, thank you very much. That is what I was thinking too.
Okay, great.
Thank
Yes,
you.
I'll
No, that
add
was very helpful. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, the reading lead. Yes, Deborah, thank you. The reading lead has a great one. I'll put that in as well. Okay, yes, phonemic inventories. Thank you, Deborah. Okay, any other questions did I miss? All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us tonight. In the chat, I believe Kathy has the link. Yes, here's the link to the certificate. Thank you again for joining us, and please come to our next PLC. It's going to be on fluency for multilingual learners. Thank you all so much for taking out the time tonight. I know September is a busy month, so we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.